All right, everybody. Thanks very much for coming out tonight. We've got a special guest with us tonight, Mr. Ken Boker, who will be, you know you're presenting, right?
Oh, so I'm supposed to stand here.
So, thanks for coming out, and let's enjoy it. Ken, please.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Welcome everybody, and thanks for coming out. And this is a fan, I was just saying to Mark, I was here yesterday helping with the awards dinner, bringing the EV out. Come on in, we're just about to start. So. And you guys have a great establishment. You guys have the best facility out of all the organizations so far that I've been to. So welcome and thank you very much for coming out. And before I start, thank you guys. Does everybody here came in an EV, is that correct? Yeah, that's fantastic. My hat's off to you because a lot of you guys have had EVs a lot longer than I have. I've only had mine not even a year. And you've been out there as pioneers, you've been evangelizing, you've been trying to create awareness and change some minds. So I appreciate that. So thank you all for coming out. As Mark said, my name is Ken Boker, and I host a channel, a YouTube channel called EV Revolution Show. Is everybody familiar with that? Or maybe show of hands who's not familiar with it, maybe. Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you coming out. You will get a little bit familiar with it tonight, and I've got some cards to hand out as well if you want afterwards. But I do that as a passion. So, you know, I started originally in the YouTube landscape with Trevor doing the Model 3 Owners Club show about 3 years or so ago. After the reveal of the Model 3, we started that. But I always viewed the EV landscape as more global, as more holistic, right? It's not one vendor that can change it. One vendor can get it started, certainly Tesla did, but we need everybody else just for the sheer numbers and the size and that the market is, and you know, the climate change that we need to impact, it's a pretty big deal, so we can't just have a few thousand vehicles to try to make that change. So I wanted to kind of expand the show and look at it from a more global perspective. Come on in. Come on in, I'm just starting off, so no problem. So we created the EV Revolution show just over a year ago, early April, and then I've been kind of running at that, and Trevor was still very much a Tesla guy and wanted to continue doing what he was doing with the investments he's made in Model 3, so we do communicate, and sometimes we jointly do things. So what I was asked to do a couple of months ago, a month and a half ago, by the EVS Scarborough chapter, was to come in and talk about the Canadian International Auto Show and give you an update about that show. Well, it's been a couple of months since the show, so what I've done is kind of morphed that presentation into a little bit more of the EV landscape in Canada. And the whole point really is just to give you guys some information about what's going on. You know, some of the models I'm going to talk about that I saw at the show, I think most of you already know, but I'll go through quickly of those. And also get you energized about why this is really a great time to be not only an EV owner, but an EV evangelist and getting out there and talking to people. So, you know, it's fantastic, the time frame that we have. I mean, you know, if you watch my show, you've heard this hockey stick since day one we've been talking about. And magical 2020 coming up next year where the skies will part, EVs will fall from the sky, and you know, Trump will go away. No, something will happen for sure. I am gonna talk about highlights from the Canadian International Auto Show, for sure. So if a lot of guys people that watch my channel would have saw that episode where I highlighted. So there's a couple of snippets from that episode, so it might be a bit of a repeat. But what I wanted to do is kind of, before I delve into what was at the show, is kind of take a step back and look at what's the reality of the EV landscape today. You talk to some people, like my boss in my company, who says he's going to die with gas and oil in his veins because he's never going to think about an EV. He's such a hardcore motor guy, and that's okay. You know, go to the next person, right? One person doesn't want to think about it, try somebody else. But you know, there's a lot of negative rhetoric that's out there as well. So trying to give you a state of the union basically from that. And I'm sure all of you who are out there talking to people, could be friends, family, neighbors, could be at a lot of the events that I've seen a lot of familiar faces out at that you guys do and that I participate in. And we see similar questions. We see similar concerns from people. This is a survey that was done a couple of years ago that's still very relevant. Talks about, you know, what are some of the barriers to EV adoption for people that really don't know anything about the environment, about that. We know that today the auto industry builds pretty good cars. I can remember my first car, a 74 Vega. There was a fun time. People know what I'm talking about. You know, if I got a couple of years out of that car, I was doing all right, you know, and then later on, maybe you got 5 years and a little duct tape and the Hyundai Pony and all these kind of things came out. you were scraping them together. But now you buy a car, you expect that car to last at least 10 years, right? And us Canadians, we typically like to drive our cars into the ground and get as much use and return on that investment as possible and make sure that it's paid for itself time and time again. So those expectations carry over into the EV landscape. They can't just be some Heathkit type of, and the older people will recognize the reference there. You can't just slap something together and get it out there as an EV that's gonna last, right? These things have to be built for a good quality. Range, time to charge, affordability are all still very much, you know, we were talking to people last night, well, what kind of range? How much is it? Oh man, what can I say? I mean, these are the questions that people don't know. And choice of powertrains is still relevant. Top 5 buying criteria, and this could probably go almost with ICE vehicles as well, but to a little bit different degree, but certainly for the EVs is reliability, right? Especially here in Canada with the drastic weather swings that we get, you know, from -30 one day to +10 the next day and everything in between. It's gotta be reliable, gotta be able to get in and go in this thing. The distance between charging stops is still a concern. A lot of people, their eyes light up when we pull out our phones and show them the plug share app and they go, what? All those dots, all those colors? Yeah, these are all, really, I had no idea. Time they're required to recharge. A lot of people think they have to go see a movie while the car is charging and then, you know, 3 hours later come out, especially if it's the Avengers, and I haven't seen it yet, so no spoilers, but going tomorrow. New car purchase price is a big deal, and of course the cost of repair and maintenance. A lot of them still think these are expensive to repair and to maintain more so. In fact, I had somebody come to me a few weeks ago, and God bless them, but they had asked me, can I take my EV through a car wash? They really did not know. And I said, yes you can, everything is sealed, it's quite safe, they weatherproof this thing. Don't worry about it, go clean it. So, but it's a concern, right? People have these questions. So here's a graph that talks about that hockey stick that I mentioned almost every show, if you've been watching it, even with Trevor. This is relevant because it's a 2018 results that came out. And a couple things I want to point out. This is a combination of both battery electric vehicle and plug-in hybrid electric vehicle for light vehicles. So that includes pickup trucks and SUVs and automobiles. And as you can see, China's leading the game. So I think we all know that China is probably half the market itself, if not slightly more, but certainly almost half. And they are just going gangbusters, as they say all the time. The numbers to take away, though, are, and I know it's a little split screen, so I'll read them. In 2018, EV sales in the US were about 350,000 units. So that's every EV, battery electric vehicle and plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. The rest of the world is 1.7 million and change. A lot of that being China, and then Europe and all the other countries that are shown there. The total for the same segment, with ICE vehicles included, was 93.6 million. So when people are, and I've said this on my show a few times, you know, I go into forums and I chat rooms and emails and stuff, and people, oh, Model 3 is the best, only buy Model 3, or don't buy a Leaf, or don't buy a Bolt, or whatever. Those conversations we should be having. We should be talking to people that have ICE vehicles and saying, look at all this choice you have. You have all these different choices, and there's pros and cons to each depending on what you're looking for. Because we have just about 2 million or so, just over 2 million EVs out of 93, so we got about 90 million a year, at least from last year, of potential vehicles and owners that we can switch to EVs. So it's a huge market, right? A huge piece of the pie. So let's not all fight for this little piece. Let's all go out there and promote this piece. So some astounding numbers. Now this might be hard to see. No, it's actually pretty good. The last one, it was tough to see. So these are the manufacturers for auto sales worldwide for 2018. The top 20, there's a whole list of them. A couple things to point out, that Tesla is not even in the top 50 yet. I suspect that will change this year for them if they can get the numbers out that they're talking about. The number 1, Volkswagen Group, 10.8, almost 11 million units in that category. Astounding. Now, VW has 12 different brands. They have at least 9 or 10 plants, if not more, around the world. They have a 5-digit workforce. Pretty big company, so it's not fair to compare them to some of the others like Tesla, which is still, for all intents and purposes, almost in startup mode but expanding. But 10.8 million of those, and I bring that up because I do bring up VW a lot on the show, and they've been putting a lot of hype out there for the last couple of years. They've been making a lot of promises. They've been spending money. This is the door. They've been lining up battery suppliers. They've been retooling plants. They're spending money not only on marketing, and you'll see some marketing today from VW. They are pretty serious about getting into the game because they have to. They don't want to be left behind. They have a hole that they have to dig themselves out of as well from a mindset. And they also have the capability to do that. So that's why I put that number up there. And it's surprising to see Toyota as number 2. And I'll show you what the number 1 car is in a sec. What's disappointing about Toyota is that as big as they are, they're not really doing much in the electric vehicle game. They've come out with this self-charging hybrid. Pretty cool stuff. I gotta get me one of those. But I don't need any of these things. It self-charges.
Yeah.
It's got a little, I don't know, a little chipmunk or
It's a
something.
hamster, yeah.
Hamster in there. Renault, Nissan, and all the others are here, the top guys. So most of these guys are doing something of electrification, right? We see a lot of these that make sense. And again, there's a whole bunch more that, especially into China, they cover a lot of that. But interesting numbers. This one, yeah, a little tiny to see, but I'll read it out. The top 2 vehicles. Number 1, Toyota Corolla. Worldwide, almost 1.2 million units. Not far behind the F-Series pickup truck. So you've heard me say on the show that the pickup truck, the SUV market is just gold right now. There's gold in them there hills in the SUV and pickups. That's why guys like Rivian have chosen to go big time into that, right? That's like guys like Atlas, which I talked about, are thinking of getting into that. Some other areas. One, because it's a big sales market. Now, most of these are North American sales, but it doesn't matter. They still represent global numbers. And it's also a high margin business. I know Tesla's trying to get 30 points, 25 points out of the Model 3, 35 if they can for gross margins. You're into the 55, 60s when you're into the pickup truck. Well, you want a steel deer bar in the front? Sure, that's $1,200. Let's slap that on. You want running boards? Sure, another $1,200. Boy, they add a lot of margin to those vehicles when you start beefing them up. Hi guys, come on in. Hey, grab a seat. How are you? So interesting, and the other thing I wanted to point out is that the Corolla, being the number 1 vehicle, has a starting MSRP of about 17,000 Canadian. Now I had a funny guy in the last meeting that I went to say, well, it doesn't have air conditioning, you add air, you're at 20 grand. Okay, so you're at 20 grand, whatever. But the reason I bring that out is because I keep harping on we need to get EV pricing down. Really to get it to the mass market, taking away the truck segment, but just the automobiles, we need to get down to that kind of price point, right? You see a lot of either vehicles on there or SUVs, probably the majority are SUVs and pickup trucks until you get into sedans and stuff. We need to get pricing down to really go much more mass market. So when VW comes out, and I just read an article yesterday that they are going to try their darndest to get something below 30,000 euros as the entry point for the ID, 29 and change, and then with some incentive you can get into the low 20s euro for a 48 kilowatt hour version of their new ID. We have to get that pricing down in order to get more mass market, and it is coming. So I just wanted to point out that there is a valid marketplace for that price point once we can get the economies of scale and all the other stuff down. Tesla's not in the top 100 yet of this chart either, but I suspect number 30 is 400,000. So I suspect, I forget what the planned number for Model 3s is this year, 300,000?
360.
And so they should definitely hit the top 100 this year. Probably in the top 50, I would imagine, for that. So good, we want to get them out. Any questions on any of this stuff so far? I'm going a little quick. Everybody's cool? Good? All right. This is that very similar look at that hockey stick, so I won't repeat myself. The only thing I wanted to point out on this is that Bloomberg predicts that we'll see cost parity by 2022. Does everybody understand what cost parity is? If you don't, okay? Basically it means that when a battery electric vehicle or an EV costs about the same as a comparable internal combustion vehicle. So if I can go out and buy a $30,000 Honda Civic, I should be able to go out and buy a $30,000 battery electric vehicle of comparable size and features and all that kind of stuff. Range depends, right? But certainly comparable. Right now, we don't have that, and that's why we need things like incentives to help drive adoption because the cost parity is too big. So Bloomberg predicts 2022. Gee, that's only 2.5 years ago. You know, that's pretty fast. I think a little longer. I think it's 5 to 7 years, but I would love for it to be sooner because that'll again help drive adoption. Because you saw earlier that price was one of the top arguments that people that want to buy EVs put back to you, saying, "Well, they're too expensive." So we need to get those prices down. This is a cool slide that I picked up when I did the first presentation, and it's got lots of info on it, political parties and what generation you're from, and different slices on the same question. But this company surveyed a bunch of Canadians, and they asked, they asked basically, when do you think, or how long will it take for electric vehicles to become the majority? So right now we have 93 million car sales, 2 million are EVs, 91 million are ICE vehicles. Shrink that down to whatever the Canadian numbers are, which I don't know what they are, maybe 10% of that. And right now, so we have this high proportion of ICE vehicles to a low proportion of EVs, but when do we see that switching? So when do we see that tipping point, that shift, paradigm shift? National average is 56% think it'll happen in 10 years or less. And then the others are 11 to 15 or more than 15. I think 10 years might be slightly ambitious, but I think it's doable. If the big guys get into the game, if the Fords really get serious, if the GMs get more serious, if Toyota finally decides to get into the game, if Honda decides that the new Urban does well and they want to throw more and maybe get back on, walk away a little bit from hydrogen and invest more in EVs. We need the big guys to get into that to have more choice. And that's broken down by province and again by demographics. Because it's interesting that us boomers, which I see a few boomers in the room, have a very positive attitude about that along with older ones. And then the younger ones have an even higher one. And that's good. Because the millennials and everybody that's, I don't know what the one is after millennials. I don't know, I lost track. But they're used to technology, right? We grew up with, I grew up when I was a teenager getting introduced to keyboards. I remember punch cards and all that kind of stuff in computers before. But, and a mouse. Now it's swipe, touch, verbal. It's different sensorial aspects to computing, which fits right into some of the high tech that you're seeing from Tesla, and that's going to continue to come in the EV marketplace. So that's going to help drive adoption for these age groups. So pretty positive stuff. Also want you to get you to feel good because these are some quotes that were done a long time ago. 2011, electric cars are an extraordinarily bad idea. They're not just a bad idea, but they're an extraordinarily bad idea. So he had to emphasize how bad that was from Forbes. More like a glorified golf cart, I've heard that before, than tech from the LA Times. And sorry, electric cars are a waste of space. So that whole thing's a waste of space. Okay. We'll have to do something about that. Now, GM's going all in, Ford's going all in. Volkswagen is betting the future, right? These are all headlines, and there's more and more, right, that we know of. So the tides have certainly changed in just a few short years, right? Really just a few short years, not even a decade. So what does that mean for the poor old internal combustion vehicle? My 76 Dodge, I'm trying to remember what that is, Cordova maybe, with the real Corinthian leather. Anybody remember that? Ricardo Montalban? I don't know what that is. Cheap deal if anybody wants to buy it, by the way. No, it's not mine, sir. What's going on with these cars? Are they gone? Are they really dead? Well, not really. We've had internal combustion vehicles for well over a century. And they're so ingrained in our social culture that we can't just switch overnight. No matter what, you could drop almost something free on us and we'll still hesitate. So there is a switch, but it's going to take some time. And that was represented at the Canadian International Auto Show. And certainly, I had an opportunity to go to Detroit this year, and it was even more represented in Detroit. In fact, I had a hard time trying to find an EV in Detroit. I had to go into corners and uncover things, and there's an EV way back there. But the clock is ticking. We know that, right? We know that there's going to be a shift. I personally don't see internal combustion vehicles going away in my lifetime or even my daughter's lifetime, because there's still and I talked about that with the other Mark yesterday. There's still parts of the world that's going to struggle with adoption on that, but they may turn around and adopt it quicker because it might be easier for them. But the infrastructure and just the socio-economic factors of some of these countries that just don't have the means to get into it, but they might look at it as a better way versus going into ICE. So thank you for that conversation, because it really kind of changed my thinking a little bit. But there's also the commercial side, airlines, trains, trucks, trucking, all that stuff, that we are going to nip away at that, chip away at those markets, but a complete flip, I think, is going to take a long time. So I don't see our dependency on fossil fuels going completely away globally anytime soon, but I do see it drastically changing, and that's why we're here and do what we do. And that was evident at CIS because there was a lot of ICE vehicles. However, the good thing about that is that there were over 40 electrified vehicles at the Canadian International Auto Show, the most they ever had at the auto show. I remember going last year, and there was a couple of dozen. So this year you could almost, show of hands who went down to the auto show. Yeah. So you could almost walk a corner and trip over an EV there. Yeah. Which is a good thing, right? We want them out there. We want manufacturers to put them out front and center, or to put them up with their prime SUVs and pickup trucks and all the real money makers for them. We want them out there. So that was a good sign, and I just continue to see that growing. I know the promoter for the show, and he was very happy with the EV presence and everything that's going there. So let me get into the kind of the heart of the matter, what was new for the EV landscape. A lot of this might be repetitive. Yes, Larry?
Ken, I just thought before you move
Yep.
on to that, Peter from Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association, which is one of the chapters, okay?
Yep.
And he said 85% of the cars on the show floor were electric
At the Vancouver show.
at the Geneva show.
Oh,
which
the
is
Geneva, yes.
Which is supposedly, the groundbreaking show.
Yep.
I just thought, since we were talking shows, I would.
Thanks for reminding me, because I said it at the last one and I didn't say it here. You're absolutely right. That was a quantum shift in automobile shows. Geneva is like one of the biggies of the world from a global sense. There's a lot of big releases, tons of money poured into that show. It's a really big show. It makes Toronto look like just a weekend fair kind of thing. It's a big deal. And you're absolutely right. If you were following the announcements, there were more electrified announcements about electrified vehicles than internal combustion vehicle cars. So it was really a big deal there. Yes, sir.
The other point, I know it's a concern with the sticker price, but when I talk to people and I get them to sit down and do a calculation on if they kept the car for 100,000 kilometers, the cost of fuel and maintenance, the difference, it flattens out pretty quick, and at 200,000, the electric car is cheaper.
It certainly can. The only thing you have to be conscious of is when you really write the numbers down is the upfront purchase price, because we still have that cost disparity. Last year, the argument was almost not there, because with the 14,000 that we were able to capitalize on, it really closed the gap on that. So my Leaf out the door, SL fully loaded, was $35K tax in out the door. If I looked at a comparable Kia Niro, a Kia Soul EX or whatever, at about 30,000-ish or 32,000, 3,000 to 5,000 difference, let's say 3,000, I'm making that up in the first year of my fuel savings, first year and a half, right, in maintenance. So much more easier argument. Without those incentives right now the 5,000 will be kicking in soon, and I'll talk about that in a bit. In some cases, the cost disparity is a little too much. So it does take longer than I mean, you're breaking it out into kilometers, so that could be, depending on what you're doing, a year, but it could be 6 to 8 years for ROI, for a return on that investment for that gap. So you do have to do the numbers, but it is positive. I think that's a great selling tool or a data point to talk to people who are interested, but not the only one that we should leverage. I think, I got into this because I wanted zero emission. So if I was gonna pay a bit more for it, I'm at the stage of my life where I could do that. So and I think a lot of people are into the same boat here. So that's, one area where people are gonna wanna look at, but certainly the torque, the EV Smile that we get from the instant torque, the low to zero maintenance, the fun factor, the quietness, all these other benefits really come to play in the EVs. But there are some offsets. Winter range, right? We know range drops. Could be even 50% in some cases. So something that we need to consider, but certainly a good point, sir. Yeah.
and also safety. Like,
Absolutely, safety is a great point. I talked to a lot of people about that because of the batteries adding rigidity to the frame. You know, not only that they have a low center of gravity, so it gives them better handling characteristics, but rigidity, they add a lot to that structure. And you see that in some of those offset tests, crash tests, and some of the side impact and stuff, where, you know, other cars might really get dinged up pretty good. EVs tend to fare pretty well, even, you know, some of the other ones, not just the Teslas alone. Absolutely, it's a good point. So I'm gonna go through, yes?
Just one quick one.
Yeah.
I think that the price per liter of fuel, which has risen so dramatically in the last 18 months.
And it's going up more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver's passed $1.70 a liter this week. I've got to think that's going to speed up the adoption rates as well.
I think so. I mean, BC is a great province because they still have their incentives going. I don't know if they still have their trash for cars or cars for trash or something program as well, which is another little
Scrap it.
benefit. Pardon me?
Scrap it.
Scrap it, yeah, that's what it
no,
is. Yeah.
trash it.
Something like that. So they had some program there. So that in combination with the provincial tax, provincial credit, and the federal one, now you're talking, right? Theirs is 4,500 in BC, if I remember correctly. 4 or 5. So now another 5, you're at 10. Quebec's, you know, at 8 and 5, they're going to be at 13. So certainly those two provinces alone will start. And Quebec's already going kind of crazy. In fact, they're thinking of slowing it down, I think.
BC actually has up to 50K on big trucks.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Yes, sir.
That program that you're referring to, is it for 55,000 and under though, or is it?
Yeah, I'll explain that. I have a slide that I'll bring that up in. So if I don't, please raise your hand again.
Okay.
I will explain that. I did on the show, but I will. That's important. So let me just do a quick tour of some of the EV landscape here. What's new for 2019? So nobody has, I don't think, a 62 kilowatt Leaf Plus. I haven't seen one yet. I hope to get my hands on one next month to actually kind of do a bit of a road test in. Virtually identical in looks to the current 40 Gen 2 Leaf. Major differences, obviously the battery size, I'm going to convert this all into kilometers. Who cares about miles? 364 kilometer range, 215 horse, 250 foot-pounds of torque. It's got the same motor, they've just tweaked it and provided more power to that motor. So they've tweaked the motor and they've also tweaked the e-pedal, for those who are familiar with the e-pedal, to handle the additional weight of the bigger battery. The pack's, its size is only about 4 millimeters or about a quarter inch or so bigger. So it's not really, they're able to cram more batteries and more cells in a little bit different way into the same physical size. There's still the same 6.6 kilowatt onboard charger for level 2, supports up to 100 kilowatt DC fast charging, still chattable. Mitsubishi and Nissan are not going to be moving, certainly Nissan won't be moving away from chattable anytime soon. I know that that's a bit of a debate in some parts of the US and in some parts of Europe, but Nissan is big on this vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, commercial type applications and residential applications, and Chatham is the only bidirectional charging standard currently right now. They've just adopted a version 2.0, 2 point something now of Chatham, so it's going to stay for a while, but it does work well. They've enhanced their smartphone, the little bit entertainment systems, and some small things like that, badging. Starts at just under 44,000 for the S, 46,600 for the SV, and 49,500 for the SL top of the line for the Plus. The key takeaway that I've seen so far on the Plus is I haven't heard of it experiencing any of the dreaded so-called rapid gate issues. And for people that have been following the second gen Leaf, know what that term means, where Nissan actually throttles down the battery charging. So they've come out with a software patch in Europe where they've released it to moderate that throttling a little better, so to allow you to maintain a higher throughput for a little longer time to shorten your charging experiences. They have not released that patch in North America. I am fighting for us consumers for that. I'm not fighting too hard because there's not that many affected vehicles. It was only for a certain time. Then they actually started shipping the Gen 2 Leaf with that version of software. But I am trying to get them to consider it for North America. We'll see what happens. I fast charged and I've experienced it once. I don't fast charge a lot, so for me it's not a big deal, but I know for some of the, I really gotta get there people, it can be an issue. Apparently the Plus doesn't have any temperature issues so far that's been reported, and it can sustain, it takes 100 kilowatt, it can peak, but it can sustain 70 to about 80%. It starts tapering down to about 44, 42, that kind of levels there. So it has much better, faster charging throughput. So good news for Leaf fans. So they should continue to do well. Nissan's kind of carved out, as I always say, this nice market share for a good all-around value EV. They won't win any category on its own, but they'll score good in a lot of things. So as an all-around value, it's a decent car. What else for 2019, 2020? Kia Soul. Nobody has one yet because I haven't seen any on the roads, the new Soul EVs. But you know, they've done a change. It's not as polarizing as it was, but you know, it does have a nice youthful vibe to it. It's the same battery that's in the gentleman's Kona that came, and I'll talk about that one in a sec. 64 kilowatt hour battery pack, liquid cooling, 385 EPA range, 200 horse, 291 foot-pound, 170 kilowatt motor, 7.2 onboard charging, up to 100, of DC fast charging with CCS combos, and a complete refresh of the design of the exterior and some tweaking of the interior to give it more space. I will be putting up a price list near the end, and I'm going to factor in the Canadian incentives, so I'll talk about that to summarize all this again. Kia Soul EV is coming in two versions. They're coming in their standard version, which uses a 39.2, so pretty well 40 kilowatt hour battery pack with about 248 kilometers of range at $42,595. And then the one that more people are going to buy, the 64 kilowatt version, will start at $51,595, and you can option that up, called the Limited. So that's the Soul EV. I expect Kia to do very well with that product in conjunction with their others. Now, if you watch the show, I started this little EV of the Year award for this year, being my first year. And looking at a lot of the vehicles that were out there, I decided to pick the Kia Niro EV. And that's just me giving it to Reg, who was the product guy at the show at the time, who I did the interview with. So a really, really nice guy, knew his stuff. That's not behind us, that's the Soul, the Niro's in the background. But I wanted to recognize that I just all around, I thought the Niro just had a lot of really good qualities for the North American market. Not too big, not too small. Good same battery as the other one, 64, all the other attributes. A little less techy than the Kona, a little bit less. So for more mainstream buyers that might be afraid of tech, you know, too much tech would be a good, little bit more boot space, trunk space, a little bit bigger back seat. So just all around, just that little bit more, which I think will appeal to many more buyers. So hence the reason for my pick on that vehicle. But the specs are basically the same as the Soul and the upcoming Kona that I'll talk about as well. 64 kilowatt, 385 kilometer range, and so forth. For price points, they start at $53,795, and there might be a lower version. I'm gonna have to, when my sheet comes up, I'll get that lower pricing, because I've been doing all that. A very nice vehicle, and again, I think it'll do well, just the sizing. Kind of like a RAV4-ish CRV. You saw earlier when I showed the top vehicles that both those vehicles are in the top 30, top 20. So that is a nice segment of the market, especially here in Canada. I see a ton of those small to mid-size SUVs around here that people want to drive. So it's definitely going to do very well. The only concern with the Kias and potentially the Hyundai Kona is just availability. You waited 3 months?
3.
3 months, right? And I'm suspecting that they could even delay newer orders even longer because of the battery shortage issues. All the Kias and the Konas are built in one plant in South Korea currently, so it's just a constraint issue as far as getting cells. I believe their supplier is LG, but they might have a couple of others. So it's just a constraint issue. That could be fluff for just saying we don't want to ship too many because we're losing money on these. Maybe, I don't know. But I got to take their word that they want to get these things out. So hopefully we'll start seeing more on the road. Anybody ordered one? Have one on order? No. You have a?
No, they have one in Orangeville at their dealership.
Yes, I heard that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, I have to trek up there and take it for a spin. Yes, I have to do that. But all around a good vehicle. And then, of course, the Kona. So I don't need to talk about it. Now we're all going to get up and we're going to go outside and we're going to look at that, a real life one we can touch and feel. again, it's a nice sweet spot. That small SUV, compact SUV, CUV type segment is really, really hot, especially here in North America, but and in Europe as well, because these things are small enough to dart around the cities, the smaller streets. If you've ever been to Europe, cobblestone and all this stuff is very real. It's a very big problem for a lot of those areas. They need to drive through tiny spots. And in Italy, it's crazy, kind of wheel your way around people. So smaller is a little better. So good all-around vehicle. Same specs, but it does get better range. It's over 400 kilometer range. 415 is the stated EPA range. It'll be good to see what you guys actually get. You've
We
only had
picked
it.
it up this morning, was 465,
465.
yeah,
Wow. And that was
And
like at 50.
100 kilometers. had on it.
And we hit 100 kilometers, and we hit what, 10, 12 degrees today?
It's
Was our high?
8.
It's kind of windy. Yeah.
Cold.
So wait till it gets up to 20. So yeah, you'll be doing all right. So definitely in the low to mid fours should be achievable, and then your winter rate should be pretty decent because it'll have a heater, it'll have the heat pump and all that good stuff that helps with the winters. So excellent. And so far, you'll love the acceleration on it.
Oh,
It
yeah.
goes. You smiled really fast. No hesitation.
Most people think
that
EVs
EV smile.
don't go fast.
Yeah, they do, right? Yeah.
They get up beside you and they
That's
like
it.
go, and so you just go.
Is that you? Now we know who has not done that. Aha, yes, we're all guilty of that one. And sometimes you just can't resist, right? This, charger comes up to you and you, all right, let's just cross the other lights and then he'll pass me, but at least I'll get off the line, right? It's a fun feeling. So great vehicle, they should do well. So let's upscale it now. Let's go to the higher end marketplace. The Audi e-tron. Not the A3 that the one gentleman has, that's here, but this is the big SUV, or they're kind of like their Q5. I think it's between a Q5 and a Q7, if I have that right. If I'm remembering my model lines. I did see this in Toronto. It does have the fit and finish from Audi. It has the features. It's just a very, very nicely done vehicle. The issue that some people are pointing out is that it's not the most efficient vehicle for an EV. And that is true. It doesn't have as good a stats as it should for something that has a 95 kilowatt hour battery, which only gets about 415 kilometers of range. This Kona is smaller and it's getting a lot more range. But it has almost 360 horsepower with over 400 foot-pounds of torque in a dual wheel or all-wheel drive configuration with a 9.6 kilowatt onboard charger and up to 150 kilowatt DC fast charging for CCS combo. Starts at about 90 grand and goes up from there, and it's on reservation. So again, Audi is going after their marketplace, their customer. They want to get their customers to trade whatever they have, the older SUVs, in for this. They're not really factoring efficiencies. Truth be known, at least in my opinion, is that most people that buy larger size SUVs aren't really too concerned about miles per gallon. They're looking for other things. Height, maybe some off-road capabilities, or at least country back roads, snow, all-wheel drive, pulling something, whether it be a small trailer or a boat or something recreational. Kids, dogs, hockey bags, all this kind of stuff are what's important, families, to get around. Safety, the bigger, the more safe, all that kind of stuff. That's the general type of population that look at these larger SUV vehicles. And I think Audi has catered to that. Yes, sir?
Do you know the cubic feet of the storage?
I do not. It's a good size with the seats folded down. I forget how many liters it is. But I did have a look at it, and one could sleep in it quite easily. So if you needed a place, 90 grand, you have a house. Mobile house. Cheap, right?
Yeah, it is cheap.
Can you buy any 90 grand in Waterloo anymore? Those days are gone. But yeah, it's a good size boot. I forget what the space is, but it's a good size. Yeah, you can definitely get a bike in there. If I put the seats down.
So this is what we consider SUV or a crossover?
That would be an SUV.
SUV.
That would it's big enough to get into that SUV. Crossovers are typically a little smaller that have, a little bit of a stance and that kind of thing. In fact, my next vehicle, I believe, coming up could be classified as a CUV, as a crossover. It's kind of, I think what Jaguar has done with the I-Pace is they've kind of just created their own little market space with this vehicle. I know originally, somehow, I don't know if it was Jaguar or the media, but somebody deemed this as a Tesla killer, and we've heard that a couple of times for different models. I don't see this at all as competing with the it probably competes more with the S than it would with an X, right? The X is we have one out there, so it's a completely different vehicle. This does not have the space as an X. It doesn't have the height. Actually, it could get the height because you can raise this thing about 4 inches through the air suspension, but it's a different vehicle. Jaguar is going after their brand, again, their loyal consumers with fit and finish, with luxury, with driving, really, really dynamic driving. A lot of horsepower in this thing. It's got a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack, about 375 kilometer EPA range, 400 horse, over 500 foot-pounds of torque. Sorry, my watch is buzzing away there. Dual motor, all-wheel drive. 7 kilowatt onboard charger, which is a little disappointing for the size, but it does support up to 100 kilowatt DC fast charging, CCS. That's kind of important for us because as Electrified Canada rolls out, and Petro-Canada and some of these other guys start rolling out more fast chargers over the next few years, we should start seeing some 100, 150, 350 kilowatt chargers out there, not just the lowly little 50s. So it will come into play for these kind of vehicles. Starts just under 90,000, and again, it's a fit and finish. The back seat's not huge. You can get 3 in a pinch, but it's more suited for 4 people, to be honest. But the quality, I had a chance to drive it on a closed loop track that Jaguar had last fall at a media event. So I went out at Sherway Gardens. They fenced part of it off, and they made a little track. And what I can say, it was a very substantial car. You could feel the weight, but it doesn't feel like an Escalade or something like that, which has a lot of weight. It's pretty nimble because of the power it has, but it's still substantial. You close the doors, you know they close. The fit and finish, the materials are high end. They've still got to tweak their AV system. I know they've had some software glitch you see in there, but they'll get with it. This is their first all-electric ground-up vehicle, designed from the ground up. So it's their first stab at it. And as I've said on the shows, keep your eye on Jaguar because they are going all into electrification. I suspect within the next 10 years or less, every single vehicle they put out will have electrified, either be all battery electric and or plug-in hybrid, will have some form of electrification. So they're really betting their business on it. They're convinced on it. And look out for Land Rover and some of their other brands as well. So, really, really nice car. And I know the owner of this building had one, a gray one. So if you see it, it's his. Looks just like that. Staying on the high-end circuit, Mercedes-Benz with their EQC. So finally had a chance to see that vehicle here in Toronto. Again, nothing less than what I would expect from Mercedes, from a fit and finish, from a quality, from an appointment perspective. 80 kilowatt hour battery pack, about 320 or so kilometers, most likely up to 370 kilometer range because they're very vague on some of these numbers. 400 horse, 564 foot-pounds of torque. Again, a lot of torque, dual motors to get you going. 7.4 onboard charger and up to 150 kilowatt of DC fast charging support. I could not for the life of me find pricing on this thing, so I guess that is going to start around 90 grand. That's just a guess. And as Mercedes has not released, you can put $1,000 or $2,000 down to reserve one. You won't get it until late this year because I know that they're only getting a few hundred, from what I understand, into Canada this year because they're having a bit of a constraint issue, just like Audi is now on the e-tron. But again, for their clientele, for people that stay in that brand or that want to stay in the luxury brand, it should do well. It has more than enough range to get you around town, get you to soccer practice and all this other stuff, and keep you safe, clear the snow. You don't have to worry about all that stuff. Very nice vehicle. Anybody bought one? Nobody's bought one yet? No. Or put a reservation down? No? Okay. Any questions so far? Yes, sir.
It's not directly related to Mercedes, but I've seen this charger on 2 of these advertisements. It's called Ionity.
The Ionities, yes, in Europe, yeah.
Ionity, it's
Yep.
called?
Yep.
Oh, it's only in Europe?
Yeah, they're only in Europe right now that I'm aware of. So they're a chain that are ramping up quite fast. You've got Fastned, which is one of the bigger ones, and Ionity. I'm not sure if they're in the US or not. I'm pretty sure it's just Europe. But again, they are spooling up with up to 300, 350 kilowatt support.
350 kilowatts?
Yeah, because you have to add some liquid cooling into the lines when you start getting up into those temps, the 350 range. So for the Porsche Taycan that will be coming out, their emission that'll be able to support 300 kilowatt fast charging, you need to have some coolant running through that charging hose because you're putting so much power through that, so it's a little bit different design engineering. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff though. It's all coming. And that's all to give, to give that experience, right, of almost like when we used to go get gas, right, 5-10 minutes to pump and pay and all that kind of stuff. The technology, the market is going there. It may never get exactly to there, but it's gonna close the gap enough to still be a compelling reason to look at a battery electric vehicle and not to be negative towards adoption, because I have to wait 45 minutes for an 80% charge. Those charging times are gonna come down over time. So the next one that came out, so I was lucky enough to get there early so I could watch the ID Cross announcement. So this is their concept car. If you're familiar with Volkswagen, they're launching a lot of different platforms of electrified vehicles, all EV vehicles, under the ID banner. So this is a completely new platform that's built again from the ground up as an electric vehicle. It's based on their MEB, Modular Electric Something platform. It's German for mean something. And they are going to basically use that same platform for a multitude of different kinds of vehicles. And they're also OEMing that platform. So some of their other divisions like Skoda and Seat and so forth will be using the same platform. They'll make it available for other manufacturers if they want to buy it and build their own vehicles with it. So this is a few minutes of my interview with Thomas. So the ones that watch this, I'm sorry you're gonna be seeing it again. I will preface that Thomas is a real marketing guy. So he's real energetic, he's excited, he's a very strong marketing guy, he means well. So he's very funny in some of the things he says, but that is because he's truly passionate about what he's doing. So I'll let that play. Hopefully it's on. That's it.
Canadian International Auto Show at WREVA.
Oops. Back.
Battery 100%.
There we go.
Connected to MacBook Pro 5.
Oops. Back, there we go. Technology.
MacBook Pro 5 disconnected.
Wow.
Battery 100%.
Right, guy. Sorry about this. Just give me 1 sec here.
Right, guys, I'm here in Toronto at the Canadian International Auto Show at the VW booth. They just unveiled the ID Cross.
All right, I'm not sure if my external speaker's not working, but I'll do it this way.
That's down there. I'm here with Thomas. He's the Top Gun. How are you, Thomas? He's really the Top Gun in VW Canada.
I like to think so.
Anybody else will say he's not. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me. So this is exciting. I mean, you guys have been coming out with a lot of product, a lot of announcements in the industry. I was down in Detroit a few weeks ago, and I talked to, I believe it was Matthew, who is part of the USA team.
Absolutely.
He was talking about some of the growth. What can you share with us from a Canadian viewpoint on where Volkswagen is going with electrification?
Well, if I can use a poker analogy, Ken, we're going all in on this one. The future's electric. That's the fact. And whether the future comes in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years, we're not sure. It's going to depend on consumers, because ultimately, the people that write their name on a check, they decide when things are coming. But we want to be ready for this. We don't want to be the last ones to the party. So we've already made great inroads. As you know, we've got an e-Golf, which is available in Canada. A great car. We can't get enough of them.
I was going to say.
We can't get enough of them. Even though we're getting 3 times as many this year as we got last year, we still can't get enough. And that's good news. Like, these are the early adopters, the people that are really excited. So that's already given us a little bit of a sort of a leg up to know that, yes, there are people out there that want this kind of technology, but the volumes are kind of small. Having said that, in Wolfsburg, where the decisions are made, we have decided that electrification is the way we are going. So much so that if you have a look, and I'm sure you've got some video of this beautiful car, the ID.R. That's the car we took to Pikes Peak last year. We took that to show that electric cars can do anything that gasoline-powered cars can.
If not better.
If not better. So we went there and we thought, we're going to set a new electric car record going up this international hill climb. Well, 8 minutes later, or more specifically, 7 minutes and 57 seconds later, not only did we have a new electric record, but we had a new overall record. We're going to take this thing to the Nürburgring later this year and see if we can change some record books there as well.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that's gonna do.
But that's just the start. That's just to show us the technology. We're learning so much from this car about charge rates, about discharge, about performance in different
Yeah,
temperatures
sugary
on
cereal
different
that
surfaces
morning.
and such. We're taking that data and we're putting it into our database, our brain trust, if you will. And we've come up with, or along the way, we've come up with a platform that we call MEB. And the ID Cross you see behind us is one of the first cars that will come off this new MEB platform.
Now, I talked a lot about the MEB platform, got a lot of good pictures, and in the last few shows, Thomas, I've really been talking a lot about VW. I think some of my fans are getting sick of it, but I mean,
I'm not.
I'm not either, because you guys are really moving and shaking the industry. You know, Tesla's awakened it, I think, maybe the sleeping giant, if you want to use that analogy, with the Model 3 and kind of, you know, fireworking that, but everybody's getting into the game, and what I tell folks is, you know, you guys are spending some serious money, $48 billion in, you know, battery contracts for the next several years. You know, you want to build a million cars a year, you know, by in a not too distant future. I mean, these are some really staggering numbers, and if anybody's got the mic to do it, it's you guys.
Well, and let's not forget, we've just dedicated $1 million to enhancing our factory presence in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We are going to build MEB cars there because if we're going to build, like we say, 1 million a year, we can't do it in one factory. You know, we've got 2, 3 factories in Germany that are being retooled right now to start producing these cars. We're going to start seeing them on the road in as little as 18 months' time, 24 months in Canada. So this is happening. This is not something that's pie in the sky that's coming way down the road. This is near, and it's exciting, and we really think that Canadians are going to love it, and we're going to reach that point of critical mass where that stone really gathers speed. And once there's enough of them out there, once there's enough people that are driving these cars, the word is going to get out that they're believable, that they work, that you can drive them to work every day, you can use it as a single car in a family. We know we're going to get there. As you mentioned, we're spending an awful lot of money, so my pension depends on this working. So you know where I'm
I
at.
like that believable aspect, because it is, it really is, it's an educational awareness that you have to bring to people to say, what, you mean I can actually drive maybe through a car wash, can you get out in the rain? I mean, will it get me to work and back? That range anxiety, I thought it's more bladder anxiety now on these long trips, it's not so much range anymore. And you guys are really filling that EV market void with some really good products. Now, what's coming out first then in that 2021 calendar year time frame?
First car you see in North America is going to be exactly what you're looking at behind you. Now, we call it the ID Cross internally. Whether or not that ends up being the actual name that we put on the tailgate of the vehicle, we'll see. But this is what the vehicle's going to look like. I'm sure we're going to make a few little adjustments
Yeah,
to it.
side mirrors here,
Yeah,
all that
we
kind of
probably
stuff.
won't have sliding doors in the back there. It looks cool in the show car, but I don't know if that's going to work its way to production. But fundamentally, this is what you're going to see. And the technology it's so close. And as I mentioned, we couldn't be more excited by it.
Excellent, excellent. And I know you're gonna have multiple battery choice options.
That's correct.
Flavors and different price points.
Yep.
Do you have any idea where you see an entry price point for this yet? Any speculation?
It's going to be right now, we have the range of somewhere between 0 and $1 million. Okay. Zero the better.
Are you running for politics?
I'll tell you, we've got a pencil sharpener at our head office in Ajax, and we are sharpening those pencils every day. We have the most exciting new thing that anyone's ever seen. If we don't sell any, it's good for nothing. So the price has to be right. And we can't rely on subsidies. We can't rely on...
Don't have it here in Ontario.
Exactly. Those are gone. So we need to make this thing viable. I promise you, it will be viable.
Excellent. And lastly, I've talked a lot about VW's efforts in electrification from a charging perspective with Electrifying America and Electrifying Canada aspects that are going on. Can you tell us some time frames on when we should start seeing some Canadian rollout of those
Yes,
chargers?
indeed. We should start seeing, as you mentioned, the first phase of our Electrify Canada initiative rolling out towards the end of Q2 this year. So right around the middle of the year, we'll start seeing the first
After
charging
summer
stations.
vacation traveling?
Absolutely. And, you know, as with our electric vehicle development, we're all in on Electrify Canada. We need to show Canadians that there are places to charge cars. And let's not forget, we estimate 70% of the charging is going to get done at home anyways, but that leaves 30%. So we want to make sure that Canadians know that if they drive an electric car, whether it's a Volkswagen or somebody else's, you'll be able to charge it. Electrify Canada is there to fulfill that mission.
Excellent. And these are going to be 150 kilowatt chargers? to
150
start?
and 350, but they'll also be able to charge down as low as 50. So everybody that's on the road right now, well, everybody, I don't know about golf carts and stuff like that, but
honest.
No, that's great. We're really excited about VW and what you guys are bringing to the EV game. We look forward to seeing a lot more. Thanks, Tom.
We're excited to be bringing it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
So as you see, Mr. Excitement, he's comical. Actually, I'll be doing an audio podcast with him at the end of May or early June, so it should be quite fun. But the passion is there. I mean, they really truly believe in what they're doing with the Electrify America. That they're behind on installing. So they're gonna continue moving with that. And the Electrify Canada, of course, will be in full swing this year. So they're gonna provide a support mechanism. But they've come out and said they want to, at some point in the not so distant future, I would say within 5 years or so, 5 to 7 years, they want to be shipping 1 million EVs a year. So again, Tesla's getting to the 400,000 mark if all goes well, 4 and change this year. They want to be much more in a short period of time. And if anybody can do that, they got multiple plants. Chattanooga will be the North American supplier for the ID platform here. So it's all good news. Questions so far? Yes, sir.
Does it have a front trunk?
They didn't open it up because I asked. Again, sometimes in concepts they don't go too deep into opening them up. You won't see the sliding door like it is in the back. You won't see the camera-based side mirrors because that's not legal in North America. So some of the features you see will be incorporated, but I don't know if it'll have. I suspect not, but because this is a longer size vehicle, they may incorporate something like what Jaguar has done, which is a very small kind of, you can put a handbag in front.
Is it a dual motor?
They will come in dual motor configurations, correct. Yeah.
So, do you know that they have changed their assembly line? Because most of the, I think,
Because right now Wolfsburg pushes out all the e-Golfs
Yes.
and then the e-Ups.
the
Right? But
auto
they're-
car that was, I think in March, I went and lots of car brands said that because it's an assembly line thing, because they do not want to change the assembly line, they just take out the ICE motor, they put the electrical motor there. So had Volkswagen changed completely their assembly line to leave?
Yes, and that's what they're working on currently, which will take them another year or so to retool. So when we talk about
So it's a
retooling
brand
those
new
plants,
assembly line?
that's what
Oh,
they
okay.
mean. They go in there and they rechange the assembly lines, the robotics, the stamping, all the different areas that a car goes through. They redo that programming, all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty big job and costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So again, if manufacturers like VW and others are doing that, that means they're spending some real
Exactly.
tangible money to do that. Yep, and it'll be, again, their ID is a global available car. It will be available in multiple countries, continents. So they're gonna have plants, at least three or four to start, that'll be supplying different variants of the vehicles.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm surprised they're pushing on with the LED platform because I know one big issue they had was cost.
mhm,
That it's actually way more expensive to keep working on that platform.
yep.
And so with him saying that they want to come in at a price where consumers, I don't know how they're gonna do that.
Well, it's a great segue to my next show, which should be aired Sunday or Monday, depending on when I'm done the editing, hopefully Sunday. I actually talk about VW pricing because it just came up this week. You know, they could be expecting to sell it at a loss to start for potentially that reason. One of the issues that battery pricing still hasn't come down to a more tangible level. You know, you've heard, you know, Elon talk about this $100 US per kilowatt that they need to get these things down to per kilowatt hour. So that we're not there yet, 160, 170, 150-ish range, what it seems to be. So VW is going to be having to deal with that. But they have inked agreements with multiple battery suppliers so that they don't have choke points in their supply chain like some of the others, like Kia and Hyundai are experiencing, and Audi for delays. They've signed agreements with 4 or 5, you know, LG Chem, SDI, all the main guys to get batteries from different elements so that if one's slowing down, they can pick it up from the other. So they may start selling at a loss. That's quite real. But somebody like a VW has the benefits of they sell more than just EVs. So they have other vehicles and other product lines that they can take those profits and help offset the losses until they can get those economies of scale up to a point where they're making profit. But you're absolutely right, you know, to address your point, the e-Golf, the e-Up to a degree were basically, ICE vehicles electrified, right? Drop the engine, put an engine, inverter, and a motor in there, or motor, inverter, charger, and electrified transmission, and off you go. And they were, in most cases I heard that the e-Golf, they were running, was at a loss. but, you know, it was a compliance-driven type of
Mhm.
mechanism, right? California's a huge market in the ZEV states. It's a big market, a lot of European, EU pushes as well for compliance, so there was reasoning from a business sense to do that for them. And I suspect that may start off again with the ID, but they should ramp up economies of scale relatively fast to start making money on it. Especially the bigger battery pack versions. They're gonna do like a 48, somewhere in the 60s to 70s, and then 105, 111 or something like that range for the top end. So they're gonna have different battery pack versions. And lastly, this again will be a speaker. So this was the Genesis concept. So Genesis is the high-end division of Hyundai. I guess I keep screwing that up. I keep thinking it's Kia. So I'll let that play. And this was their reveal at the Canadian show of their Essentia compact or concept car.
Concept car, which I'm so excited about. This is just a fantastically gorgeous car. I'm here with Patrick, who's going to tell us all about it. Hi, Patrick. Thanks very much for taking the time to
My
chat with
pleasure,
you as
thank
well.
you.
What can you tell us about this gorgeous looking vehicle?
So this is the Essentia. It is a concept vehicle from Genesis, and it is in the format of a Gran Turismo EV coupe. So
Wow.
those classic GT proportions,
Yeah.
the beautiful long hood, the extended wheelbase,
Yeah.
the swept back roof line, the gargantuan rear wheel arches, all of those great things, but of course with an EV propulsion
Who would have
system.
thought of an EV, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the beauty of an EV is it can be effective or efficient, but it can also be fast.
True.
So, you know, as much as there's a story here with the EV, what this car really is more of a rolling canvas.
Yeah.
It's almost a canvas upon which rests the DNA of our future design direction. So, a lot of the elements that you see on this vehicle will make their way onto future Genesis production models.
Okay.
And on the EV side of things, I can say that there will be EV Genesis models in the not too distant future.
So within the next 2 to 5 years, probably a safe
I'll
bet?
leave that one to the imagination. yeah.
Okay, so yes, sir, it could be. Any specs that you can tell us?
That's a good
that's in
line.
the concept?
So again, because it's a concept vehicle,
Right,
we
okay.
don't get into too much detail.
Sure.
Of course, any such vehicle, if it did go to production, would be based on the latest and greatest technology at the time. But in the vision of our design team, this car would have a 0 to 60 time of less than 3 seconds. So gives you a sense of what we'd be looking for in terms of the electric motor
That's
output.
ludicrous Tesla fast, so when you're into that time.
Certainly is, yeah.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Well, listen, it's a gorgeous car. Really, really excited to see you guys get into the EV game, and I know that through the quality and the process and the manufacturing strength that you guys have, you'll come out with some really great solutions, and we're looking forward to that. Anything else you wanted to say about the vehicle, or about your future electrification plans?
Again, I can't get into any details about our future product plans, but what I can say is that Genesis is committed to the highest possible standards of vehicle design and engineering, and what we've seen thus far with all of our products is that they all ride on custom-built platforms designed specifically to be used in luxury products. They're built in their own dedicated factory, and that same meticulous attention to detail and dedicated engineering will apply to any vehicle we build in the future, including EVs.
Wow, beautiful. Well,
Yeah, excellent. So I just read something about a week or so ago that they're actually thinking of taking what you see there into more of a full production mode. So
Wow.
there's actually serious consideration. Again, it'll be a high-end, I suspect, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 type vehicle, showcasing a lot of power, performance, that kind of stuff from a coupe. But it should, you know, it's cool that some of these designs are going to make it in production. They've also just recently, you watched one of the last shows, I talked about the Genesis Mint, M-I-N-T, a two-door coupe as well, a little bit smaller. So they are starting to really get into that game and flex their arm there. So that's good, more choice. And of course, all the other players are at the auto show. So everything that's in the parking lot here was represented at the auto show by every manufacturer and more. So I didn't want to miss them. There were a lot of plug-in hybrids. So I do talk to people, and a lot of them are maybe a little apprehensive of getting into a full electric vehicle. So a plug-in hybrid is a good option if that's the case. My philosophy is anything with a plug is a good thing. I'm not big on just on regular hybrids that really all they do is just sip gas a little bit less, but they still emit. I like plug-ins because there is that threshold that you can at least drive it in some sort of battery only range, like the Volts, which are a really decent range in others. So certainly not to be discounted, but I do see eventually plug-in hybrids going away because they're kind of a stepping stone until full battery electric vehicles become more mainstream, become more popular, and satisfy the majority of the marketplace. So they'll still be around. But everything there was at the show. So we talked about the Canadian incentive that's starting May 1st. This is a work in progress. In fact, I edited it just yesterday because some new numbers came out, some new changes. But this is Canadian pricing as of a couple days ago of what's available from a fully electric landscape so far here in Canada, starting with the Smart Forte 2 and going down to the X100D. I took a guess at the Mercedes pricing, because again, I couldn't find pricing. A couple things I wanted to highlight. The upgrade that's now come out with Tesla for the Model S long range with the more efficient motors and some of the tweaks that they've done there now gives it about 600 kilometer range. So the longest range electric vehicle you can get on the planet today. So that's outstanding for Tesla, but the price did go up as well. When I just did this, I noticed all the prices went up on those models, and they've introduced standard range models back into the S and the X platforms. They were gone, they're now there. The key takeaway for this slide is that everything in green, my understanding, would qualify for the $5,000 federal incentive. So I'm glad that the green's showing up, because in the other presentation it was kind of washed out. So what it means is that if you have an electrified vehicle under $45,000 and over a certain battery pack size, and I think it's 13 or 15, it's a pretty small kilowatt, 15, then you qualify for the $5,000 incentive. So all those vehicles that are under 45,000, and this board here is kind of cutting out the line, but just there's kind of a thick black line just under the Kona. That's where all those base trims or those models come in at. And within the same model family, if you have other trim levels up to 55,000, then they also qualify. So that's why the Leaf Plus, because the S version starts at 43,998, but the other ones, the SV and the SL, are over 45,000, but that's why they qualify. So they're over 45,000, but they're under 55,000, and they're within the same product family as the base model that is under that 45,000. If there was no S plus Leaf, then those other two would not qualify. So hopefully that explains how this works. It can be a little confusing. Tesla isn't the only one left out. A lot of people are upset that the Model 3 is not inclusive in that. Poor BMW with their i3 is nowhere to be found as well on getting the incentive. So Tesla's not alone. Jaguar, Mercedes as well won't be inclusive into that. So there are a few other brands. My take on it is I don't think the government was slanted towards any manufacturer. They had to pick a number that seemed beneficial and that would qualify for get a lot of the vehicles to qualify for that, so they picked the number. There is unfortunately that stigma that arose, especially during Ford's campaign, where he went around saying, you know, you guys are funding rich people to buy Teslas. We're giving them money. You know, that kind of just gave the wrong perception of how that program was working, and that stigma still sticks with a lot of people. So that could be one of the reasons why they kept the price down at 45,000. My personal feeling as well is that 45,000 is a lot of money for a car in Canada. I think so. You know, it's a pretty hefty price for any vehicle. You get into the luxury brands when you start thinking 45,000. You know, into the Beamers and this kind of stuff, some of the lower end products. So it's a pretty big chunk of change. And again, it's a perception that if they want this program to have some legs, they need to give it the best chance that they can. So I'm telling some people, instead of being down that Tesla and some of the others aren't in it, shift it the other direction and say, look how many on that list, the majority of you know, over 50% are within that program. And it's a national program. So now, people in Inuvik and Saskatchewan and Alberta, if they will buy them, but they could, they can now be interested and incentivized to get into EVs that qualify. We're one of the few countries that have not adopted a national program. We're behind a lot of the other leading countries, especially in Europe, that have national EV incentives. So this is a really big deal for us to have the first fully national program. If you know anybody, or you yourselves are interested in buying an EV to take advantage of that, I would do it between May and October. Because who knows what's going to happen in October. They have a 3-year plan, they have a $300 million or something like that bucket of money that it's a first come, first serve. But who knows? You know, if that blue wave that we're seeing comes to Canada as a national, I suspect this program to be gone like that, which would be unfortunate. So if you're out talking to people, stress the fact that there is this $5,000 incentive, and this is also a list of plug-in hybrids that I was able to pick that qualified. One unique variable on this list is the Pacifica hybrid. That was purposely written in for a couple of reasons, I suspect. One, I was told because they're built in Windsor, so let's support Canadian jobs for now. But my other reasoning is I think it's really important to have that because it's the only minivan that qualifies. And you know, FCA, Chrysler, they are still the king of minivans, right? You know, when our daughter came along, we got a minivan. We had a couple minivans for the first 10 years or so. It's just, you know, with families and they're very versatile. And I'm very glad because that is still a substantial market. A lot of people buying minivans, and rather than buy hybrids, plug-in hybrids versus regular minivans if they have the choice. Terry, who I don't know if he's come out here or not, he's got a Pacifica. And, you know, yeah, he's getting 50, 60 kilometers in the summer of the range. And that's great for just, you know, booting about on a daily stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad or whatever that want to use that. So I'm glad that they were inclusive of that vehicle. You had a question, sir?
No,
No,
sorry.
okay. Sure.
I had one, on the previous
Yes.
slide,
Yeah.
something you said earlier about not all of these being available. I mean, even if you did order one in May,
Yep.
how many of those wouldn't even show up this year?
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point, especially to deal with Kia and Hyundai. I mean, I know they're trying. I suspect that if you go in and if this is crucial for your deal, that they will do everything in their power to get those deliveries, just like they did last year when the Ontario incentives were going away. You saw in July, August, September, a mad scramble of deliveries that occurred, not just from Tesla, but from everybody. Everybody who had an order, they wanted to fill that because they know that people were going to back out of those orders. A lot of them would have without that incentive. So I suspect that dealerships, that there'll be a prioritization or an allocation factor that will be considered if this program looks like it's going to die, or to try to get it in before that time. I can't guarantee that because I don't work for those companies, but I would guess that they're going to want to keep these sales alive, and that buyers are going to stress the importance of the incentive for them. So we'll have to wait and see. We don't have any information, unless you do, Mark, as far as how the program's going to be delivered. It's either going to be you fill out a form like before and you get a check in the mail, or the dealer takes it for you and the dealer takes it off the price, and then you walk away, you go away, or a combination. I suspect it might be a combination. I know that April 30th, which is just in a few days, they're doing a national training for dealers, a WebEx of sort, to walk them through the program. So because of that, I suspect that there might be some sort of portal or some sort of web interface that dealers will be able to set up themselves on and do the applications for consumers. So I suspect most of it will go through dealers, but I don't know for sure how that's going to work. So that's the only thing we don't know so far. Did that answer your question, sir, about the incentive? Kind of makes sense? Yeah.
I thought the announcement was that it was a tax credit.
No, it's going to be money.
It's
It's going to be in the form of a check or something, or some sort of money off.
I understand that if you own a business, if your business buys a vehicle, then there's
Business is different, correct?
you can write off
Yeah.
up to 55,000 the first year.
Correct. Yeah, the business is an accelerated write-off, so you would, instead of amortizing that vehicle over 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, you write it all off in the first year. So that's what they're giving you. So I didn't talk about the business because I wasn't sure how relevant that is, and I haven't really dug deeply into that. But it's an accelerated type of write-off program for businesses. There was a limit, I think, of 10 or something like that as well. But that's to encourage municipalities, regions, fleets, businesses, whatever, to convert some of their company vehicles into EVs and plug-in hybrids. So which should help. Yes, sir?
Is the amount for the plug-in hybrids the same as for the fully electric?
No, it's less. I believe it's 2,500?
Yes.
Yes, it's half. So it's less, yeah. Pretty good for an old guy. I remember some things. So that's it. So you guys have all joined the revolution. Viva la revolution. We're gonna go out there and start marching the streets and all that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
I don't know if people have been noticing, but the Mitsubishi Outlander.
Yep.
They've been taking $7,000 off for the last little while because of the loss of the rebate in Ontario. And now with the $2,500 that the government's offering, that's almost 10 grand off the price of that car. So.
Great point.
And it is a full-size SUV.
Yeah,
So.
the full-size SUV with a decent plug-in only range,
Yeah.
battery-only range, and they've sold over 200,000 of these globally in the last 3 years. So it's one of these cars that just, they sell and it's kind of, they keep it quiet. It's doing quite well for Mitsubishi. They're very happy with that. So again, a good alternative to maybe getting into, you know, another SUV with that battery range that it has. So that was my intro to my YouTube channel, the videos that I do, that's all the specs on me, and I'll give you all cards, whoever wants a card at the end here tonight. Love you to watch the show, subscribe if you'd like. I do this for the passion. This is not a business for me. I work full time, I have a family, so that supports us. I do this because I believe in the cause, I believe in getting rid of tailpipes and getting into zero emission at some point. I've already kind of fulfilled my mission because I've got, excuse me, several emails and comments from people over the last couple of years saying that, you know, they switched to an EV, they talked to me or they watched the shows and they really liked what I said or what we did, so they switched, and that's really what I'm all about, so doing this kind of stuff. Yes, sir?
There's what other rebate available, if you buy a used EV?
Yes.
You can get $1,000?
Good point, yes, so Plug and Drive is running a program on behalf of a benefactor who put up a couple $1 million in a fund, and again, first come, first serve, so that if you go and attend a 1-hour workshop, you have to register with Plug and Drive in Toronto, you go attend one of their workshops. Now, if you're already EV centric and part of a club and stuff like that, you could probably reach out to them and say, do I really need to come to your workshop? Because I already have an EV, I already know this. They'll probably tell you no, but it's good to check. But if you attend the workshop and then you buy a used EV up to a certain amount, I think it's 50 grand, or it's pretty high anyway. You can pretty well almost buy, you can buy a used S if you can find one cheap enough at that price, and you'll get $1,000. So this is from a private benefactor that created a fund to help spur adoption of used EVs, because that's a marketplace that's booming in Europe. When I was over at London last year for the Fully Charged, the first event, few of my friends actually are in that business of doing used EVs. That's all they do is used EVs, and it's a booming business, and it's starting to take off here because we're starting to see inventory, right? Some of the used stuff is coming back from Nissan, some of the other Mitsu and these kind of guys that are off lease, or people looking to upscale, trade up into bigger form factors. So they're starting to become inventory into the used market that people want to specialize in. Because you do need to know, you know, don't go to Joe's lot on the corner of Keel and whatever and buy a used Leaf from him, because he'll have no idea about state of charges and leaf spying, all this kind of stuff. So you need to have somebody that knows what they're doing. So make sure you do that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
Do you have any sense, we were just talking about used, or
Yep.
any sense of the residual values of electric vehicles compared to the ICE vehicles?
Yeah, it's a great question. I haven't analyzed that market very heavily. I think Tesla is the leader when it comes to residual values in the electrified marketplace. Again, because they have they're a premium brand, and they just have, it's a noticeable brand, and so they just tend to hold their value better than most of the others. But there are, you know, Kelley Blue Books, and there are numbers that you can get on residual values. I think they're probably very similar to ICE vehicles, depending on the brand and the model. So, you know, a subcompact versus a midsize versus a full size, they're all going to have some different variances there. I don't know, Mark. Like, anybody else have any experience in knowing
It's pretty young in the market, so.
Yeah, still young. So, I mean, you know, we're only 8 years or so, 9 years into this. So, Larry, you might have something to add?
Yes, RBC has an app called Drive, and that's actually how I sold my first one when I was at the auto show, not this year, last year. And you put in what vehicle you have, you actually put in your VIN number, and you put in how many kilometers, and it handed a figure. When the gentleman said he was looking for a used car, I opened Drive and said, there's what I want, which I was happy with, but it wasn't taking into consideration our 14 grand. And he said,
sure.
I'd pay that.
Yeah,
And that's how I sold it.
So did you think that was a fair value? Or
Definitely
that it came back
fair
with?
for
Yeah,
me,
okay.
and the fact that he was from Calgary, which had no rebates or anything, he was
yes.
really happy with it.
Yeah, okay.
So, but it's an app called Drive.
Excellent.
And you can actually, you can put in your insurance information, and I asked one of the OPP at the auto show, I said, here's a new app that can do all this. I said, if you pulled me over, will you accept this? He said, no, but he said, I bet we will in 2 years.
technology strikes again, so. Yeah, and that $1,000 is available until it runs out, basically, that program. Yes, sir?
The numbers were globally, right, that you showed for sales of cars?
Correct,
EVs.
initially, yes, yeah.
Do we have a reliable website or source for Canada, like EVs in Canada and cars in Canada?
I think Karma is probably the main.
Fleet Karma.
Fleet Karma, sorry.
Fleet
It's
Karma.
probably the main, go check them out, they're always doing studies and reports. Sometimes you have to pay for them, so I'm not sure if they're free or not, some of these analysts.
website.
But they do put numbers, so they're tracking Canadian sales. I just looked specifically at global, because I
Do you-
wanted to frame how big the market is.
Do you think that,
and global.
like, say I want to give a presentation somewhere
Yep.
and I want to reference
Yep.
a source, do you think they're good there, it's referenceable?
Yeah, check out Fleet Karma, they're
Fleet
they're
Karma.
the ones, one of the big guys that are tracking Canadian specific numbers.
Canadian, yeah, I'm
Yes,
looking for
sure.
based here in Waterloo.
Oh, really?
Oh, I didn't know that,
Yep.
okay, cool. In this
Thank you.
building?
No.
Wouldn't that be something? They should be.
We'll just go knock on the door.
Yeah, they should be, exactly.
But they do support our EV events in September, so. you-
Yes, that's right, yeah. And I think the correlation's about the same. I think we're about 2% market share in Canada as well
Uh-huh.
for EVs versus ICEs in Canada. It's
Mhm.
very corroborative, so
Mhm.
it seems to be, so.
Perfect.
Very good.
Any other questions? Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.